my recommendation is to try and find better players, because it's where progress happens more quickly, in my view. Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. My name is Ultima Ivanov and I hope you're doing well. So in today's video I would like to talk about my top 10 tips that have helped me improve at fighting games, and I will be making reference mainly to Dead or Alive throughout this video, but I do think that all these tips do apply to other fighting games, so hopefully you will still find them interesting if you play a different fighting game. So the first tip I have for you is probably something you don't want to hear, but here it is be patient. Unfortunately, progress does take time, and in particular with fighting games, it can take a longer time because essentially you have to develop some sort of muscle memory to be able to react to what's happening on screen, almost without thinking, and these sort of things, I'm afraid, don't develop overnight. And the other things to bear in mind is that you may find you initially progress quite quickly, and that progress kind of slows down with time. So you basically almost don't notice progress, but I can guarantee you that progress does happen. So, don't get discouraged if you feel like you're not progressing as quickly as you would like to, because progress is just simply slowing down essentially, but it does happen. So my second tip is to pick a character and stick to it. So what I mean by this is that, sometimes you pick a character and then you spend some time in training, and then you hop online, you start playing matches, and you basically can't win with that character. So, the temptation is to obviously think, well, that character is not working for me for whatever reason, so, I'm just gonna jump onto another character essentially. But I would say that, if you pick that character, is because there was something about that character that you liked. So I would encourage you to stick with that character, even if it means that you will probably lose a lot at the beginning. But I do feel like it's possible to, to learn the game and progress to a very high level just with one character. So, my suggestion is to stick with one character and almost master it essentially, because if you jump to another character, the risk is that you will be able to use a decent number of characters, but you won't master any of them. And so what happens is that when you meet another player that has mastered their character, you are practically at disadvantage, because you will be able to use your character at an average level perhaps, and the other player will be a master of their character, so you're almost bound to lose in a sense. So my suggestion is to stick with one character and just take it to a very good level. So tip number 3 is do your homework. So what I mean by that is that you really need to spend a lot of time in the lab. You have to lab your character. This is really a given, because in a fighting game you want to be able to maximize damage in any situation, and if not, you want to perhaps study setups that gives you some sort of frame advantage or some sort of advantage in general, and that can only be achieved by studying your character, spending a lot of time a lot of hours in the lab. And these things unfortunately do also take time, especially because then you have to be able to execute in a match whatever you practiced in the lab. So, and after you study your character and you know all the combos and etc., I would encourage you to take this a step further and going into the lab and try and recreate some situations that have happened during a match that perhaps caught you off guard. A certain setup that the other player did and you didn't expect, or it could be anything really. Actually, this is a good reason for me to recommend watching replays. I'm not a big fan of watching replays, but for this very reason I think it's worthwhile. Or alternatively, as something happened during the match, make a mental note and then go back into the lab, try to recreate that situation and try to find a solution to it. Nowadays fighting games have excellent options in the training that allows you to, for example, to record the computer's action and then basically react to it. So, this is all part of the homework in a sense, and it will really pay off, because next time the situation presents itself during a match, you will be essentially more ready. So Tip number 4 is very important. It's basically try to play with people, with players who are better than you or same level as you. You know, we all like to play with our friends, and that's absolutely fine because we all often have a good time with them. And if they do happen to, you know, be good players, all the better. But my recommendation is to try and find better players because it's where progress happens more quickly, in my view. And unfortunately, we'll probably lose a lot to, you know, these players. But at the same time, you will be able to learn new things, and hopefully, you know, they might even be able to give you feedback, just to tell you what it is that you're doing wrong or you're doing well. And this has really worked for me. And I was actually lucky enough to have friends who were also good players and were better players than me. So, you know, by playing with them almost daily, I feel like I've progressed a lot. So I have to actually thank them for that. So this leads me to the next tip number 5, which is basically, you know, recognize and celebrate small victories. So what I mean by this is that, as I said earlier, if you play with players who are better than you, you will probably lose a lot. So it's easy to get discouraged. But my advice is to, you know, try and recognize what it is that you've done well during a match, you know, and do really appreciate it. It could be anything. It could be, you know, a particularly difficult hold that you've executed, or you know, a high that you crushed with a low, or a wake-up kick that we've punished, for example. It could literally be anything, and I do feel like that anyone has the, you know, ability to recognize instantly almost that something went well during a match, and you know, perhaps at the end of the match you could just say, well, actually, I've done this well, I've done that well, so even though I lost the match, it doesn't really matter because I feel like I've made some progress. So I would really encourage you to recognize all these small victories because they will keep you motivated and they will drive you forward. So tip number 6 is study the frame data or have some sort of appreciation. I know no one likes frame data, but good players do, because there's a reason for that, because I can guarantee you that if you study frame data, it will really set you apart from other players. And in a fighting game like Dead or Alive or even Tekken, for example, knowing frame data is really crucial because you will be able to punish consistently. And you will be, especially in Tekken where you strike punish, you want to know what your punishes are, or in Dead or Alive, for example, you want to know which throw to use in what situation, etc. And at the very least, I think like everyone should know at least you know, their safe moves or semi-safe moves, and you know, obviously unsafe moves for your own character at least, and ideally for other characters. And once you know all this information and you will start applying this knowledge to, you know, your gameplay, you will really see a noticeable improvement. So don't neglect frame data and spend some time familiarizing yourself with it. So tip number 6 is to try and play with different characters. So we all love to use our main because chances are you probably win more often with your character. And this tip might seem in contradiction with what I said earlier about stick with one character, but this comes after. So once you've mastered your own character, I would encourage you to start exploring other characters. It could be a character that you particularly struggle against, or another character that you like in particular that could become your sub-main or second character essentially. So what this means is that you're going to be able to explore other tools, and you're going to be able to know that character better, and you will be able to react to their tools better essentially. So it's like putting yourself in the opponent's shoes and just trying to figure out what it is that they do that basically work for them. Because the more familiar you are with another character, the more quickly you will be able to react to them. And also I think that using a different character almost forces you to play differently, especially if it's a very different character. And that I think is gonna basically make you a better player overall. So if possible, do try and use other characters at some stage, as I said, perhaps after you've mastered your own character. So tip number 7 is very simple. When the fun stops, stop. So what I mean by that is that don't be afraid to take breaks, because we all get frustrated when we lose a lot and we don't see the results that we would like to see. So what we tend to do, we just keep playing until we get that one win that makes us feel great. But my suggestion is actually, after you lost a lot of matches, for example, just don't be afraid to take a break, walk away from the game for a day, 2 days, for as long as you need to, for a week even. And you might think like you're wasting your time, but in my view, this is not the case, because as you're not playing, your brain is kind of still processing everything that's happened, essentially. So it's actually kind of working in the background. And you may find quite often that once you go back playing with a sort of fresh mindset, you will probably be able to react to things more quickly, or just to react to a situation with more ease. So you often find that is the case, and I personally do think that is true in my own experience, and I also apply this advice at my work, because I'm a civil engineer, and oftentimes when I'm designing something and I cannot quite figure out a solution because I just cannot see it in that moment, I tend to move on to other things, if I can, of course. And then when I go back to it, I can just see it immediately. And you almost think, oh, why did I not notice it, at the beginning? So, taking breaks is actually a good thing. It could be very beneficial, and I would encourage you to do that every time you feel like taking one. So, tip number 9 is watch tournaments. I personally enjoy watching professional players, playing tournaments, especially if they use the same character that I use, because I feel like I'm basically learning new things without even playing the game. And it's also very interesting to see what they do with their character, that could be also my character, that work for them. So I think that watching tournaments is definitely a very valid way to learn, and perhaps you can make mental notes as you're watching a match, and then try to incorporate those things into your gameplay, essentially. And this leads me to my last tip, which is tip number 10, which is go to tournaments if you can, of course. I appreciate that not everyone enjoys traveling and going to tournaments, because you perhaps just prefer to play from the comfort of your room, and that's absolutely fine. However, I feel that putting yourself in a sort of high pressure situation like that of a tournament, it is really gonna make you think about what it is that you're doing during a match, because you just have to think that you spend some money to get there, you spend a lot of time to get there just to be able to play on that chair in an offline tournament. So you don't want to waste that opportunity, and you want to really give it your best shot. So what's gonna happen is that it's gonna basically put you in a sort of mindset where you really have to think carefully about everything that you do. So in that regard, I feel like that going to tournaments is really gonna make you a better player. And in this regard, I would like to stress that you may find that you will probably play a lot worse than you normally do when you play online, for example, with your friends, because obviously the high pressure environment is going to take its toll on your skills, at least initially. But I can guarantee you that if you continue going to tournaments, for example, or even if you just attend tournaments online, it's just going to make you a better player, and it's going to improve, I think, your overall gameplay in general. So these are all the tips I had for you today, guys, and I really hope you find them useful, even if you don't play Dead or Alive. I do feel like these apply to all fighting games in general. Thank you very much for watching, and do let me know in the comments if you agree with these tips and what tips you have for other players. I think it's always good to sort of share this sort of knowledge, and I really hope you have a lovely rest of the day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.